You're the daughter who works. Your sister is the daughter who has fun. Simple. If you have a problem with that, the door's right there.
I'm Layla, 28 years old, and I just got served the family role assignment like we're in some twisted corporate meeting. My sister Madison is sitting right there, probably calculating how this proclamation affects her art supply budget, while I'm still wearing my work clothes after another delightful 16-hour day. Dad just made it crystal clear that my value to this family is purely financial. How charming. The room went dead silent. Mom stopped chewing her overpriced salmon, the kind I pay for naturally. Even Madison's boyfriend looked uncomfortable, which is impressive since he's usually as emotionally aware as a houseplant. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like a walking ATM machine to the people who supposedly love you most. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me paint you a picture of how I became the family's personal banking system. It started innocently enough 2.5 years ago. Dad lost his job as a regional sales manager. Apparently, market restructuring is corporate speak for, we found someone younger and cheaper. Mom was working part-time at an upscale boutique, making barely enough to cover their weekly wine habit. The initial request was reasonable. Just help with one mortgage payment while Dad looked for work. Being the responsible daughter, and let's be honest, the only one with a steady income and functional brain, I said yes. That one payment turned into 6 months, then a year, then somehow I'm covering their entire housing situation, while Madison explores her chakras in various expensive locations around the globe. Here's the breakdown of my financial generosity, because I keep meticulous records. Occupational hazard of being a financial analyst. Monthly mortgage, $3,200. Property taxes, $400. Insurance, $200. Plus, I somehow became responsible for their cell phone plan, streaming services, and weekend dining experiences because family bonding is important. That's roughly $4,000 monthly, or $48,000 annually of my after-tax income. Meanwhile, Madison contributes precisely $0 and infinite drama to this household equation. My take-home salary is about $78,000, which means I've been living on $30,000 while subsidizing 3 adults, one of whom thinks employment is a social construct designed to crush artistic souls. The breaking point came tonight when Madison announced she'd been accepted into an exclusive photography workshop in France. Cost? A modest $8,000. And naturally, she assumed I'd fund this latest adventure in expensive self-discovery. It's such an amazing opportunity, she gushed, showing us brochures that probably cost more to print than some people make in a day. I could really establish myself as a serious artist. I calculated quickly. That's more than 2 months of mortgage payments, or my entire emergency fund that I've been rebuilding for 3 years. That sounds expensive, I said, mastering the art of understatement. Mom jumped in faster than a defender of artistic dreams everywhere. Madison's creative development is an investment in her future. What about my future? I asked, genuinely curious if anyone had considered that minor detail. Dad's response was his little speech about family roles, delivered with the authority of someone who hasn't contributed to household expenses in over 2 years. Apparently, I'm the designated worker bee, while Madison gets to be the free-spirited butterfly. How delightfully traditional. But here's what dear old Dad didn't realize. I may be the daughter who works, but I'm also the daughter who controls the bank account. And this particular bank was about to experience some serious policy changes. I set down my fork with the kind of calm that usually precedes natural disasters. Não tenho problema nenhum, I said quietly. Vocês é que vão ter quando eu parar de pagar a hipoteca desta casa amanhã. The silence that followed my little announcement was absolutely delicious. You know that moment in nature documentaries when the gazelle realizes the lion isn't just stretching? That's exactly what happened to my family's collective consciousness. Madison's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, probably calculating how this affects her French photography dreams. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate like a tiny surrender flag. Dad cycled through more facial expressions than a professional mime having an emotional breakdown. Let me give you the harsh financial reality check that my family had been conveniently ignoring. Dad, unemployed for 2.5 years, with his unemployment benefits as extinct as his work ethic. Mom, part-time boutique employee earning roughly $900 monthly, which barely covers their grocery budget when you factor in their taste for organic everything. Madison, contributing exactly $0 but infinite expertise on why traditional employment crushes the human spirit. Basic housing costs, $3,800 monthly. Add food, utilities, and Madison's artistic supplies, we're looking at roughly $5,200 in expenses versus about $900 in household income. Even my liberal arts education math skills can spot that particular problem. Layla, you're being dramatic, Mom said, employing her standard conflict avoidance strategy. Am I, though? I stood up and pulled out my phone. Should I call the mortgage company right now? Because I've got them on speed dial. Occupational habit when you're someone's personal financial lifeline. Dad finally found his voice, though it had climbed about 2 octaves. You wouldn't dare. Here's what I love about entitled people. They operate under the assumption that their victims will never fight back. They get so comfortable with the power dynamic that they forget who actually holds the cards in this little game. Watch me, I said, dialing the customer service number I knew by heart. Madison, say something, Mom hissed, apparently realizing that her freeloading daughter might have some skin in this game. Madison opened her mouth, probably to deliver some profound wisdom about family loyalty, but I held up one finger. Good evening, this is Layla Chen. I need to cancel an automatic payment scheduled for tomorrow morning. Account number ending in 4477. The customer service representative was remarkably helpful. Certainly, Ms. Chen. Would you like to reschedule this payment for later in the month? No, actually. This will be the final payment. The account holders will need to make their own arrangements going forward. Dead silence from the family peanut gallery. You could practically hear their financial security crumbling in real time. You can't just stop, Mom said weakly, like someone questioning the laws of physics. Actually, Mom, I can. Revolutionary concept, I know, but the mortgage isn't in my name. I'm not legally obligated to pay it. I've been doing it out of the kindness of my heart, which you've apparently mistaken for a contractual obligation. Dad attempted to summon some paternal authority. Young lady, you cannot just... Young lady? I laughed, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. Dad, I'm 28 years old, and I've been financially supporting your household for 2.5 years. We're way past the point where you get to lecture me like I'm grounded for missing curfew. Madison finally managed to contribute to the conversation. Where are we supposed to get $200 by tomorrow? I shrugged with the casual indifference of someone who no longer considers that her problem. Well, Madison, there's this fascinating concept called employment. I hear it's quite popular among people who need money. The panic in Dad's eyes was really setting in now as reality crashed over him like an ice-cold wave. No more automatic deposits. No more financial safety net. No more reliable daughter to absorb the consequences of their poor choices. We need to discuss this rationally, he said, his voice significantly less commanding than it had been during his little speech about family roles. No, we really don't, I said, grabbing my purse. I've been trying to discuss my feelings and my financial limits for 2 years. Tonight you made it perfectly clear that my only value to this family is my paycheck. I headed toward the door, but paused for one final observation. By the way, Madison, I hope you've been saving up for that photography workshop, because this particular ATM just went permanently out of service. The drive home felt like emerging from underwater after nearly drowning. For the first time in 2.5 years, I wasn't mentally calculating how to stretch my paycheck to cover everyone else's lifestyle choices. The relief was almost intoxicating. My phone started having what I can only describe as an electronic panic attack before I even made it to my apartment building. Text after text, each more desperate than the last. It's amazing how quickly people develop communication skills when their financial security is threatened. Mom, honey, let's talk about this calmly. Translation, please resume funding our lifestyle. Dad, don't make decisions you'll regret. Translation, I'm terrified. Madison, you're really going to let us lose our house over a stupid argument? Translation, my French photography workshop just evaporated. A stupid argument. That's what 2.5 years of financial exploitation had been reduced to. A stupid argument. The audacity was almost impressive. I silenced my phone and poured myself a glass of the good wine. You know, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, declaring independence from family dysfunction seemed pretty special to me. Sitting in my own living room, drinking my own wine, in my own space that I pay for with my own money, I had what you might call an epiphany. I'd been living like a hostage in my own life, and worse, I'd been the one holding the key to my own jail cell. My apartment isn't going to win any design awards, but it's mine. 1 bedroom, decent kitchen, a little balcony where I grow herbs that actually survive my neglect. I'd been so busy funding my parents' comfortable 3-bedroom suburban paradise that I'd never really appreciated having a space where no one could demand financial contributions from me. The next morning brought the digital equivalent of a natural disaster, 42 missed calls and 53 text messages. I made coffee. Good coffee, the kind I can afford when I'm not subsidizing other people's expenses, and read through the messages like morning entertainment. The texts fell into predictable categories. Mom's guilt trips about family loyalty, as if loyalty was a one-way street that led directly to my bank account. Dad's increasingly desperate attempts at paternal authority that rang about as hollow as his job search efforts. Madison's frantic calculations of how she'd fund her artistic lifestyle without her personal financial fairy godmother. But the message that actually made me laugh out loud came from my brother Derek. "What the hell did you do?" Mom called me crying about losing the house. I called Derek back because he lives across the country and has the luxury of objective perspective on our family's dysfunction. "Derek, I stopped paying Mom and Dad's mortgage." Long silence. "Wait, you've been paying their mortgage? For how long?" 2.5 years. $3,200 monthly plus utilities and insurance. "Jesus, Layla, that's..." I could hear him calculating. "That's almost $40,000 a year. Try $96,000 over the full period, but who's counting?" More silence. "I had no idea it was that extensive. I thought you were just helping out occasionally." "That's because they presented it as occasional help while it became my second full-time job." Derek sighed. "I can't take on that kind of expense. Teaching salaries don't exactly cover additional mortgage payments." "I'm not asking you to. I'm just done being their permanent solution to temporary problems that somehow became permanent. Have you ever experienced the moment when you realize your family has been treating you like a business rather than a person? After talking to Derek, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at my financial situation without family obligations factoring into the equation. The results were honestly shocking. Without the $4,000 monthly drain, I could actually save money. Real money. Enough to finally pursue my dream of starting my own consulting business. Enough to take that trip to New Zealand I'd been postponing for 3 years. Enough to have an emergency fund that wasn't constantly being drained for other people's emergencies. That afternoon brought a visit from Mom, armed with red eyes and her concerned mother voice. "Honey, we need to fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Mom. I'm just not funding your lifestyle anymore." "But we'll lose the house." "Then you'll need to figure out how to prevent that. I hear employment is still a viable option." She tried every manipulation technique in the book. Guilt about family loyalty. Conveniently ignoring that loyalty should work both directions. Reminders of everything they'd done for me growing up, as if parenting was a loan that required financial repayment. Predictions of regret I'd feel when they were homeless. Because apparently I'm responsible for preventing homelessness I didn't create. Finally, I said what needed to be said. "Mom, I love you. But your financial problems stopped being my responsibility the moment Dad told me my only value is my paycheck." When she left, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Actual, genuine peace with my decision. Because here's the truth about family obligation that nobody mentions in those heartwarming holiday movies. It's only obligation if you choose to accept it. 1 week after my declaration of financial independence, reality was settling over my family like fog after a storm. The frantic phone calls had evolved into more strategic panic, and I was getting a front row seat to watch just how deep their dependency rabbit hole actually went. Madison called Tuesday morning, and her voice had completely shed its usual entitled confidence. "Layla, I need to ask you something, and please don't laugh. I'm listening. How do people actually get jobs? Like, what's the actual process?" I had to set the phone down for a moment because I was either going to laugh hysterically or scream into the void. My 25-year-old sister, college graduate with a communications degree, was asking me to explain the basic concept of employment. It's like asking for detailed instructions on how to breathe. "Madison, you submit applications, interview with potential employers, and hopefully receive job offers. But where do I submit applications? What kind of jobs could someone like me even do? And what do I wear to an interview?" This conversation revealed the stunning depth of her detachment from adult reality. She'd been so thoroughly cushioned by family support that basic life skills had never developed. Part of me felt genuinely sorry for her. A bigger part of me felt completely vindicated about my decision. "Madison, you have a communications degree. You could work in marketing, social media management, public relations, event planning. There are actual career paths for people with your education. But I don't have any experience." Then you start with entry-level positions and build experience. You know, like every other human being in the workforce. Long pause. "What about the photography workshop in France? What about it?" "I already paid the deposit using my emergency credit card." Of course she did. My sister had an emergency credit card for art workshops but zero understanding of how to generate income. The irony was almost artistic in itself. "Madison, that's not my problem anymore. You made that financial decision without consulting your former funding source." Wednesday brought Dad's attempt at negotiation, delivered with the desperation of someone whose bluff had been called. Layla, what if we split the mortgage payment? You cover half, we'll figure out the other half somehow. No. No? Just like that? Dad, I'm not negotiating payment plans. I'm not paying half, I'm not paying a quarter, I'm not paying anything toward your housing expenses anymore. But we can't afford the full payment without your help. Then you'll need to find a way to afford it, or find housing you can actually afford. Revolutionary concepts, I know. Here's what fascinates me about people who become financially dependent on others. They never want to discuss the arrangement until you threaten to end it. For 2.5 years, nobody asked if I minded sacrificing my financial goals for their comfort. But the moment I prioritize my own needs, suddenly I'm being unreasonable and selfish. Thursday evening brought the most interesting development yet. I was working late when Mom called, and her voice carried a defeat I'd never heard before. Honey, I need to ask you something directly. Are you really never going to help us financially again? Mom, I'm happy to help in ways that don't involve me sacrificing my financial stability for your comfort. What does that mean exactly? I can help you create a realistic budget. I can help Dad improve his resume and job search strategy. I can help Madison understand how the employment process actually works. But I'm not paying your bills anymore. Long pause while this apparently revolutionary concept sank in. We honestly don't know how to manage without that income. Then it's time to learn. You're both intelligent adults who managed finances before Dad lost his job. You can figure it out again. Friday brought the call I'd been half expecting. Derek, with what sounded like genuine concern mixed with guilt. Layla, I've been thinking about our conversation. Yeah? I feel like maybe I should have been contributing something. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. Derek, you don't need to feel guilty. You have your own family and your own financial responsibilities. But maybe I could send a little something monthly. Not much, but something to help. This was fascinating. Derek, who'd been completely absent from financial support, was offering to help now that I'd stopped carrying the entire load. It was like my refusal to continue being everyone's solution had forced people to actually examine the problem. Derek, if you want to help them, that's your choice. But don't do it because you feel guilty about my decision to stop. It's just that I keep thinking about how unfair this arrangement has been to you. Finally, someone acknowledged that this had been completely one-sided. The weekend was blissfully quiet. No emergency calls, no guilt trips, no financial requests. Just me, my apartment, and the growing realization that I'd been living like a stranger in my own life. Sunday evening, I did something I hadn't done in almost 3 years. I browsed vacation packages to New Zealand. Real ones, for places I actually wanted to visit, funded by money that would actually be mine to spend. It felt like planning my own jailbreak, and I was absolutely here for it. 2 weeks after what I'd started calling the Great Financial Emancipation, I received a text that nearly made me drop my coffee. Got a job interview tomorrow. Wish me luck. Madison. I stared at my phone for a solid minute. Madison, my perpetually unemployed sister, who'd previously treated employment like other people treated root canals, had actually applied for a job and gotten an interview. Miracles do happen, apparently. Good luck, I texted back, because despite everything, I'm not completely heartless. The interview was for a social media coordinator position at a small marketing firm. Entry-level salary, basic responsibilities. Exactly the kind of job she should have pursued 3 years ago instead of embarking on her expensive journey of self-discovery, funded by my sacrifice. She called that evening with an energy I hadn't heard since her last art gallery opening. I think it went well. They liked that I understand social media platforms, and apparently my photography portfolio demonstrated creative visual thinking. That's great, Madison. Layla, I need to tell you something. Here we go, I thought. The request for interview, outfit funding, or gas money until her first paycheck. I've been thinking about what happened at dinner, about what Dad said to you. Oh, not what I expected. You've been taking care of everyone for years, and none of us appreciated it. We just expected it like it was your job or something. This was possibly the longest speech about someone other than herself that Madison had ever delivered. I complained plenty about the financial strain, I pointed out. You mentioned it, but you never, made it seem like a big deal. You just quietly handled everything, so we assumed you were okay with it. I was never okay with it. I was trying to be helpful while hoping you'd all figure out how to be self-sufficient. But you shouldn't have had to hope. We should have been paying attention to what you were sacrificing. This was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get from Madison, and honestly, it showed more self-awareness than I'd expected. The job interview results came Friday morning. Madison got the position, $34,000 annually to start, with health benefits and room for advancement. Not life-changing money, but enough to begin building actual independence. Her first day was Monday. and she called during lunch break, sounding overwhelmed but oddly proud. It's harder than I expected, she admitted. Like, actually challenging. But I'm helping small businesses develop their social media presence, and it feels useful. That's wonderful. Layla, can I ask you something? If I paid you back gradually, maybe $50 monthly, would that be okay? For some of the money you've spent supporting us? I nearly dropped the phone. Madison, who had never voluntarily contributed to any expense, was offering to repay money I'd never asked for or expected back. You don't have to do that. I want to. I calculated roughly how much you've spent on our household, and it's probably close to $100,000 over 2.5 years. I can't repay all of that quickly, but I want to contribute something. $100,000. Hearing the number spoken aloud hit differently than my own mental calculations. That was more than most people's annual salaries. I'd given my family enough money to buy a decent car or put a down payment on a house. Meanwhile, Dad was experiencing his own reality adjustment. His job search, which had been leisurely when my paycheck covered everything, became suddenly very focused. Amazing how motivating unemployment becomes when homelessness is a genuine possibility. He'd submitted more applications in 2 weeks than in the previous 6 months combined. His pride about accepting just any job evaporated when just any job became the difference between keeping and losing their house. Wednesday evening brought news I'd been hoping for, but hardly dared expect. I got a position, Dad announced when I answered his call. That's fantastic. Tell me about it. Operations coordinator for a logistics company. It's not what I used to do, and the salary is lower than my previous job, but it's steady work with decent benefits. Dad, I'm genuinely happy for you. Layla, I owe you more than just news about my employment. This was new territory. Apologies weren't typically part of Dad's communication repertoire. What I said at dinner was wrong. You're not just the daughter who works while Madison follows her dreams. You're the daughter who saved us when we needed help. And instead of appreciating that sacrifice, I dismissed you. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you for saying that. Your mother and I are going to figure out how to manage without depending on your financial support. It might take some time to catch up on everything, but we're not going to ask you for money anymore. I appreciate that. And Layla, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It took real courage to draw that line. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for my own future, but for my family's capacity to actually grow and change instead of staying stuck in dysfunctional patterns. The crisis I'd created by cutting off financial support hadn't destroyed them. It had forced them to rediscover capabilities they'd forgotten they possessed. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be someone's permanent crutch. Who knew tough love could actually work? 4 months after my financial independence declaration, my family was becoming genuinely unrecognizable. Dad was excelling at his logistics job and seemed happier than during his entire unemployment period. Mom had increased her boutique hours and found weekend bookkeeping work. Madison was thriving at the marketing firm and had even received a small raise. But the real transformation was happening in my own life. For the first time in years, I could focus on my own goals instead of constantly calculating how to manage everyone else's emergencies. The difference was remarkable, like finally being able to think clearly after years of mental fog. I'd been researching the possibility of starting my own consulting business. With the extra $4,000 monthly that wasn't disappearing into my parents' household, I could actually build a business fund. Real money for real plans instead of perpetual financial triage. Layla, I have an idea, Madison said during one of our weekly check-ins. Yes, weekly check-ins. We actually communicated more now than when I was financially supporting her entire existence. What's that? Your consulting business idea needs marketing support, right? Eventually, yes. What if I handled that for you? I could manage your social media, create content, help establish your online presence. I paused, considering this offer. Madison, I appreciate the thought, but I can't afford to pay you much during startup. What if we worked out a trade arrangement? I handle your marketing in exchange for business mentoring and career advice. This was interesting. Instead of requesting money, Madison was proposing a mutually beneficial partnership, a professional relationship rather than financial dependency. That could actually work, I said. Let me think about what I'd need. I've already started brainstorming, she admitted. I created some sample content and a preliminary strategy. Want to see? The materials she showed me were genuinely impressive. Professional, engaging, and clearly demonstrated understanding of business marketing beyond just posting pretty pictures. Madison, this is really solid work. I've learned a lot at the marketing firm. Plus, I want to help you succeed, especially considering everything you've done for our family. 6 months after cutting off financial support, I took the leap. I registered my LLC, designed a basic website, and began reaching out to former colleagues about potential consulting opportunities. The response was encouraging, but not overwhelming. 2 former coworkers expressed interest in hiring me for small projects their companies couldn't handle internally. Not exactly a flood of business, but enough to start building a client base. My first project was a financial process analysis for a mid-size manufacturing company. Modest budget, $8,000 for 6 weeks of work, but exactly the kind of challenge I enjoyed solving. The work was invigorating in ways my regular job had stopped being years ago. Instead of analyzing other people's strategies, I was developing my own recommendations. Instead of implementing someone else's vision, I was creating solutions from scratch. But I was also terrified. The steady paycheck I'd relied on for years was gone, replaced by the uncertainty of self-employment. Some days I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake leaving corporate security for entrepreneurial chaos. "How's the consulting going?" Dad asked during one of our monthly dinners, a new tradition where we actually split the bill like civilized adults. Terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That sounds about right for someone building something meaningful. Some days I wonder if I should have stayed at Morrison & Associates and just consulted part-time. "Layla," Madison interjected, "you've wanted to start your own business for years. You're finally doing it instead of just talking about it." She was right. I'd been discussing this possibility for so long that it had started feeling more like a fantasy than a realistic goal. The breakthrough came 8 months after starting the business. My manufacturing client was so pleased with my work that they referred me to another company in their network. Suddenly, I had 2 clients instead of 1, and more importantly, I had proof that satisfied customers would generate additional business. The second project was larger, a comprehensive financial efficiency analysis for a regional restaurant chain. Timeline, 4 months. Budget, $25,000. More money than I'd ever made on a single project. "Layla, this is incredible," Madison said when I shared the news. "You're actually building something significant. It's starting to feel real instead of just hopeful. What's next?" "I want to establish myself in healthcare consulting. Hospitals and medical practices have unique financial challenges that most consultants don't understand. How do you plan to break into that market?" "Research, networking, and probably some free consultations to demonstrate expertise." Madison smiled. "That's the kind of strategic thinking that's going to make this business successful." 3 weeks later, opportunity knocked in an unexpected way. My accountant mentioned that his wife worked for a small medical practice struggling with billing efficiency and cash flow management. "Would you be interested in meeting with them?" he asked. "No guarantees, but they might be open to consulting help." "Absolutely." The medical practice consultation was my first exposure to healthcare finances, and I was fascinated. Complex insurance billing, regulatory compliance requirements, and operational inefficiencies that were bleeding money daily. "Dr. Patterson," I said after reviewing their preliminary data, "I think I can help you recover significant revenue that's currently being lost to process inefficiencies." "What kind of improvements are we talking about?" "Based on my initial analysis, probably 15 to 20% increase in monthly collections without changing your patient care operations." The project fee was modest, $12,000 for 3 months of work, but it gave me invaluable experience in healthcare consulting, and more importantly, measurable results I could use to attract larger clients. By the end of my first year in business, I had a small but steady client base, a growing reputation for practical solutions, and something I hadn't experienced in corporate employment: genuine excitement about going to work each day. The scared young woman who'd been funding everyone else's dreams while sacrificing her own had become someone building something meaningful on her own terms. And this was just the beginning. 14 months into my consulting business, I was sitting in my small office reviewing a proposal that could change everything. Pacific Northwest Regional Hospital, a mid-size facility an hour outside the city, was facing serious financial challenges and needed comprehensive efficiency consulting. The project scope was substantial. 6 months of intensive analysis covering everything from billing processes to supply chain management. Budget, $45,000. More than I'd ever been offered for a single engagement. But here's the thing about healthcare consulting that nobody warns you about. It's not just numbers on spreadsheets. These are financial decisions that directly affect patient care and community health services. The weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and motivating. "Ms. Chen," said David Park, the hospital's CFO, during our initial meeting, "I'll be direct. We're facing financial pressure that could force us to reduce services or even close certain departments. We need solutions that preserve patient care while improving our bottom line. No pressure at all, right? Just save a community hospital while maintaining medical services that people literally depend on for survival." I spent the next week deep in their financial data, and what I found was both fascinating and deeply concerning. The hospital had tremendous potential for efficiency improvements, but they also had systemic problems that required significant operational changes. David, I've completed my preliminary analysis, I said during our follow-up meeting. Good news or concerning news? Both. The concerning news is that your current trajectory is financially unsustainable without major changes. But the good news is that most of your problems are solvable through better systems and processes. I presented 12 specific areas where improved efficiency could reduce costs without affecting patient care, plus 6 revenue enhancement opportunities they weren't currently pursuing. This is comprehensive, David said, reviewing my initial report. It has to be. You don't solve financial crisis with minor adjustments. What's your realistic timeline for implementing these changes? Full implementation would take 8 to 10 months, but you could see positive cash flow improvements within 3 months if we prioritize the highest impact modifications. The hospital board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I prepared like my business depended on it, which it basically did. Landing this contract would establish my reputation in healthcare consulting and provide financial stability for my growing business. Walking into the boardroom, I felt the gravity of the situation. 15 board members, including local business leaders, community activists, and medical professionals, all of them genuinely concerned about preserving essential healthcare services for their community. My presentation took 45 minutes. I laid out the financial reality clearly but not alarmingly, then detailed specific solutions with timelines and projected outcomes. Questions? I asked when I finished. Board member Sarah Williams raised her hand. Ms. Chen, this represents a substantial investment during an already challenging financial period. What assurances can you provide? I'd anticipated this question. Sarah, I can't guarantee specific numerical outcomes. That would be irresponsible. But I can guarantee that every recommendation will be based on thorough analysis. Implementation will be carefully monitored, and will adjust strategies based on real results rather than theoretical projections. Have you worked with hospitals before? Asked Dr. Martinez. This would be my first hospital client, but I've worked extensively with complex financial systems. The principles of efficiency analysis apply across industries, and I've invested considerable time understanding healthcare-specific challenges. The questions continued for 30 minutes. Detailed, thoughtful, occasionally challenging. By the end, I felt thoroughly vetted, but fairly evaluated. We'll need time to discuss this internally, David announced. Ms. Chen, thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. I left feeling cautiously optimistic, but trying not to get overly attached to an outcome I couldn't control. The call came Friday afternoon. Layla, the board voted to move forward with your proposal. When can you start? I actually had to sit down. My consulting business had just landed its first major healthcare contract. A $45,000 engagement that would either establish my reputation in a new field or potentially end my business if I couldn't deliver results. I can start Monday, I managed to say. Excellent. We'll have the contract ready for review by end of business today. That evening, I called Madison to share the news. $45,000? Layla, that's incredible. It's also terrifying. If I mess this up, my reputation in healthcare consulting is finished before it starts. But if I succeed, I could establish myself as a serious player in a field that really needs good consultants. You're going to succeed, Madison said with more confidence than I felt. You know why? Because I'm brilliantly talented and devastatingly modest? Because you actually care about solving problems instead of just making money. That hospital needs someone who understands that their financial health affects real people's lives. What do you think will happen next? Can Layla successfully navigate her first major healthcare consulting project? 3 weeks into the hospital engagement, I was discovering that healthcare consulting was unlike anything I'd done before. Every efficiency recommendation had to consider patient safety implications. Every cost-saving measure required analysis of how it might affect care quality. But I was also discovering something else. I was genuinely good at this work. My systematic approach to financial analysis was exactly what complex healthcare operations needed. The preliminary results were encouraging. We'd identified process improvements that could save approximately $18,000 monthly without affecting patient services, plus revenue enhancements that could add another $12,000 in monthly income. More importantly, I was building relationships with healthcare professionals who respected my approach and began referring me to colleagues at other facilities. By the end of the hospital project, I had 3 additional healthcare consulting inquiries and a growing reputation for practical, results-focused solutions. The scared young woman who'd been everyone's financial safety net had become someone solving complex problems and building genuine expertise in a field that made a real difference in people's lives. 6 months into the hospital project, the results were exceeding everyone's expectations, including my own. We'd implemented efficiency improvements, saving $22,000 monthly, and revenue enhancements, adding another $15,000 in monthly income. David Park was practically glowing during our progress meetings. Layla, the board is more than pleased. We're ahead of schedule on every metric. I'm thrilled too. This project has been incredibly educational. There's something else. We'd like to discuss extending the engagement and expanding the scope. There are additional operational areas where your expertise could be valuable. More work meant establishing myself as a serious healthcare consultant, but it also meant something bigger. I was genuinely helping preserve essential medical services for the community. That afternoon brought an unexpected call from Jennifer, my former colleague at Morrison & Associates. Layla, I wanted to give you heads up about something interesting. Arnold is leaving the company. Arnold, my former boss who'd claimed credit for my work for years while passing me over for promotions. Really? What happened? New management reviewed project files and discovered some discrepancies in how credit was assigned for various client successes. Turns out several major wins that Arnold claimed were actually your work. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. The vindication felt surreal but satisfying. They asked me about it since I worked closely with both of you. I told them the truth about who actually developed those strategies and managed those client relationships. After we hung up, I felt an unexpected emotion. Pity for Arnold. Not because he'd been caught taking credit for others' work, but because he'd apparently never learned to succeed based on his own merit. Meanwhile, I was building something genuine based entirely on my own capabilities and integrity. The irony was perfect. While I was establishing myself as an independent consultant, the man who'd held back my career was facing consequences for professional dishonesty. 2 weeks later brought news that illustrated how dramatically my family dynamics had evolved. Layla, I got offered a new position, Madison announced during our weekly check-in. That's fantastic. Tell me about it. Senior social media manager for a regional marketing agency. Significant salary increase, better benefits, and they specifically mentioned being impressed with the business marketing work I've been doing for you. Madison, I'm so proud of your progress. Here's the thing. I almost turned it down. Why would you do that? Because I was worried about leaving you without marketing support for your business. This was remarkable. 18 months ago, Madison had never considered how her choices affected anyone else. Now she was factoring my business needs into her career decisions. Madison, you absolutely should take the job. I can hire someone else for marketing support, but this opportunity is specifically for you. Are you sure? I'm positive. And Madison, the fact that you considered my business in your decision-making means everything to me. After we hung up, I reflected on how completely our relationship had transformed. We'd evolved from a dynamic where she depended on me financially to one where we supported each other as professional equals. Her success enhanced mine rather than competing with it. A month later brought a surprise visitor to my office. Dad, looking more confident and energetic than I'd seen him in years. Honey, I have news I wanted to share in person. Good news, I hope. I got promoted to operations manager. Substantial salary increase, additional responsibilities, and they're sending me for management training. Dad, that's wonderful. Layla, I need to tell you something important. When you cut off financial support, it was initially devastating. But it was also the best thing that could have happened to me professionally. How so? When I was unemployed and you were covering our expenses, I got comfortable not trying very hard. I applied for jobs half-heartedly because I knew we wouldn't lose the house if I didn't find work immediately. He sat down across from my desk, looking proud but also somewhat embarrassed. But when that safety net disappeared, I had to really commit to finding employment and then excelling at it. I'd forgotten how good it feels to earn my own way and contribute meaningfully to my family's financial security. I'm glad you rediscovered that motivation. Your mother and I want to take you to dinner to celebrate your business success. Somewhere nice, our treat, absolutely no expectations of financial assistance from you. The dinner invitation felt symbolic. Not a family gathering where I'd inevitably end up paying despite everyone's promises, but a genuine celebration funded by their own earnings. That restaurant dinner was everything Dad had promised. We celebrated my growing business, Madison's career advancement, and their progress toward complete financial independence. Nobody mentioned past debts or future obligations. We were simply a family sharing a meal and celebrating each other's achievements. The conversation naturally turned to my business expansion plans. I'm considering specializing exclusively in healthcare consulting, I told them. Hospitals and medical practices have unique challenges that most financial consultants don't understand. That sounds like meaningful work, Mom said. You'd be helping preserve healthcare services for communities that need them. Exactly. It's more than just improving profit margins. It's about ensuring essential medical services remain sustainable and accessible. I'm proud of what you've built, Dad said. A year and a half ago, you were supporting our family financially. Now you're building a business that serves your community while achieving the independence you always wanted. Driving home that night, I thought about the scared young woman who'd been sacrificing her dreams to fund everyone else's comfort. That person felt like a character from someone else's story. I'd become someone who set clear boundaries, demanded professional respect, and built success through expertise rather than people-pleasing. The crisis I'd created by refusing continued financial support hadn't destroyed my family. It had forced all of us to become better, stronger versions of ourselves. And the best part? I was just getting started building something that would make a real difference in the world. 8 months after cutting off my family's financial support, I received a call that would change my business trajectory in ways I never could have anticipated. Ms. Chen, this is Margaret Stevens from Regional Healthcare Network. David Park recommended your services very highly. Thank you. How can I help you? We're a network of 4 hospitals across the region, and we're facing similar challenges to what Pacific Northwest Regional experienced. We'd like to discuss a comprehensive consulting engagement. 4 hospitals, a regional network. This wasn't just another project. This was the opportunity to establish myself as a major player in healthcare consulting. I'd be very interested in learning more about your situation. Excellent. Could you join us for a presentation next week? We're prepared to discuss a substantial engagement. The preparation for the regional healthcare presentation took a full week. This wasn't just about demonstrating my capabilities. This was about positioning myself for the kind of success that goes beyond individual achievement to genuine impact. Walking into their headquarters in Seattle that Tuesday morning, I thought about the contrast with 2 years earlier. Then, I was working 16-hour days as someone else's employee while funding my family's lifestyle. Now I was walking into a boardroom as an independent consultant with proven results, about to pitch a 6-figure engagement to a major healthcare network. The regional healthcare boardroom was impressive but not intimidating. Margaret Stevens was exactly what I'd expected from our phone conversations. Direct, intelligent, and focused on results rather than presentations. Ms. Chen, David Park's recommendation was strong, but we've also reviewed your work independently. Tell us how you'd approach a 4-hospital network with varying levels of financial challenge. For the next hour, I presented the most comprehensive analysis I'd ever prepared. System-wide efficiency opportunities, revenue enhancement strategies that could be scaled across multiple facilities, and implementation timelines that would deliver results without disrupting patient care. Questions? I asked when I finished. Dr. Patricia Wong raised her hand. Ms. Chen, this scope is ambitious. What makes you confident you can deliver results across multiple hospitals simultaneously? Dr. Wong, the principles of financial efficiency are consistent regardless of scale. The key is understanding that each hospital has unique characteristics, while recognizing that systemic problems require coordinated solutions. Give us a specific example. Supply chain management. Each hospital currently negotiates separately with vendors, missing opportunities for network-wide purchasing power. Coordinating those negotiations could reduce supply costs by 12 to 15% across all facilities. The questions continued for 40 minutes. Detailed, thorough, occasionally challenging. By the end, I felt like I'd been thoroughly evaluated, but I also felt confident about my responses. Ms. Chen, we'll need time to discuss this internally, Margaret said, but I want you to know that this presentation exceeded our expectations. I left Seattle feeling optimistic but trying not to get too attached to an outcome I couldn't control. The call came Thursday morning while I was working on quarterly projections for Pacific Northwest Regional. Layla, this is Margaret Stevens. The board voted to move forward with your proposal. I actually had to ask her to repeat the terms because my brain couldn't process what I was hearing. 18-month engagement. Regional scope. $180,000 over the contract period. Margaret, I'm honored to accept. Excellent. We'll need you to expand your team for this engagement. Will that be manageable? Expanding my team. He was transitioning from sole proprietor to actually running a consulting firm with employees. Absolutely manageable. After we hung up, I sat in my office in complete silence for several minutes. The magnitude of what had just happened was almost overwhelming. I'd gone from being dismissed by my father as the daughter who works to landing a consulting contract that would establish my business as a significant healthcare consulting firm. The first person I called was Madison. Layla, how did the presentation go? I got the contract. 18 months, 4 hospitals, More money than I ever imagined earning in my entire first year of business. Oh my God, I'm so incredibly proud of you. Madison, I'm going to need to hire employees, analysts, project managers, possibly another consultant. Would you be interested in joining the business full-time as Director of Marketing and Communications? Are you serious? Completely serious. This is going to be a real consulting firm now, and I need people I trust in key positions. Yes, absolutely yes. That evening, I drove to my parents' house to share the news. Walking up those front steps of the house whose mortgage I used to pay, felt surreal, but not bitter. Just different. Mom and Dad were in the living room, both looking relaxed and genuinely happy in ways I hadn't seen in years. "Honey," Mom said, hugging me warmly. "What brings you by?" "I have news about the business." I told them about Regional Healthcare Network, about the 18-month contract, about expanding from sole proprietor to running an actual consulting firm with employees. Dad was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with genuine pride in his voice. "Layla, what you've built is remarkable. 2 years ago, you were supporting our family financially while sacrificing your own goals. Now you're building something that's going to employ other people and serve multiple communities." It started with learning to value myself enough to demand respect. "That dinner where I was so dismissive," Dad said quietly. "That was the moment you decided to stop accepting less than you deserved, wasn't it?" "Yes. I'm sorry it took me so long to see your worth clearly. But I'm grateful you found the courage to demand better treatment, even from us." That night, lying in my own bed in my own apartment that I pay for with money I earn, I thought about the journey from that humiliating family dinner to this moment of professional triumph. The woman who'd accepted being valued only for her financial contributions had become someone who built value through expertise and demanded respect through clear boundaries. The transformation had been painful, scary, and completely worth it. 18 months after the great financial emancipation, my consulting firm occupied a suite of offices in a professional building downtown. I had 6 employees, including Madison as Director of Marketing, and 2 healthcare analysts I'd hired to manage the Regional Healthcare Network engagement. But the most significant change wasn't professional. It was personal. That Tuesday started like most others, with me reviewing quarterly performance reports for the Regional Hospital Project. The numbers were exceptional. We'd exceeded every efficiency metric, and 2 additional healthcare networks had reached out about potential consulting agreements. My phone rang mid-afternoon. It was Mom, and her voice carried genuine excitement. "Honey, your father and I have news. Good news, I hope. We're buying a house." I nearly dropped my coffee. "You're what?" "A smaller place that we can actually afford on our combined incomes. We've been saving money for 8 months and we qualified for a mortgage based entirely on our own earnings." This was huge. My parents, who'd been financially dependent on me for over 2 years, had not only achieved complete independence but were making a major financial commitment based solely on their own income. "Mom, that's incredible. Tell me about it." "It's a lovely 2-bedroom ranch in a nice neighborhood. Not as fancy as where we're living now, but it's ours. No help from anyone. No co-signers. Just us proving we can manage our own financial responsibilities." After we hung up, I reflected on how completely our family dynamic had transformed. The crisis I'd created by refusing continued financial support had forced everyone to discover capabilities they'd forgotten they possessed. That evening brought an even more significant development. I was working late, reviewing proposals for potential expansion into Oregon healthcare systems, when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Layla Chen Consulting, this is Layla." "Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Michael Harrison from the Washington State Department of Health. I'm calling about a potential state consulting opportunity." State government. That was bigger than anything I'd considered. "I'm listening." "We're developing a pilot program examining financial sustainability in rural hospitals. Your work with Regional Healthcare Network came to our attention through their quarterly reporting on improved outcomes. A state consulting contract. Rural hospitals that desperately needed the kind of systematic financial analysis I'd developed. Dr. Harrison, I'd be very interested in learning more." "Excellent. Could you join us in Olympia next week for a preliminary discussion?" The meeting in Olympia was unlike anything I'd experienced. State healthcare policy analysts, representatives from rural hospital associations, budget specialists, all gathered to discuss how to preserve essential medical services in underserved communities. "Ms. Chen," Dr. Harrison said during our private consultation, "your systematic approach to efficiency analysis is exactly what rural hospitals need, but they don't have resources to hire consultants individually. So you're proposing a program where consulting services are state-funded?" "Exactly. We select 12 rural hospitals across different regions, provide consulting support through contractors like your firm, and measure outcomes to determine whether this approach should be expanded statewide. The scope was significant: 12 hospitals, multiple regions, potential for statewide program expansion if the pilot succeeded. What kind of timeline are we discussing? 18-month pilot program, with potential extension based on results, substantial budget allocation, competitive selection process among consulting firms. I drove back to Seattle with my head spinning. The state opportunity would require significant business expansion, hiring additional consultants, establishing regional operations, but it would also establish my firm as a leader in rural healthcare consulting and policy development. Back in my office, I called a team meeting to discuss the opportunity. State consulting? Asked Sarah, my lead analyst. Layla, that's incredible. It would mean major expansion. We'd need to hire at least 4 additional consultants, establish regional offices, completely restructure our operations. Madison leaned forward. Are you worried about growing too fast? I'm terrified about growing too fast, but I'm more terrified about missing this opportunity to actually influence healthcare policy. What would you need to make it work? Asked David, my project manager. A detailed proposal demonstrating our capacity to manage multi-region operations, evidence of our results with complex healthcare systems, and a plan for scaling our approach to rural hospital challenges. The proposal preparation took 3 weeks. Every team member contributed expertise, and the final document was the most comprehensive work we'd ever produced. But the night before submitting the proposal, I had dinner with my family to celebrate Dad's promotion to Regional Operations Director. Layla, Madison said over dessert, I've been thinking about something. What's that? 18 months ago, we were all dependent on you in different ways. Now you're potentially going to be consulting with state government on healthcare policy. It's been quite a journey. But the thing is, you didn't succeed by abandoning us. You succeeded by teaching us to be independent so we could all grow stronger. Dad raised his wine glass. To Layla, who taught us that the best way to help family isn't to enable dependency, but to encourage self-sufficiency and mutual respect. And you, our mom added, to the daughter who valued herself enough to demand that we value her properly too. We clinked glasses as I thought about the scared young woman who'd been afraid to disappoint people by setting boundaries. That woman had become someone who built a successful business, influenced healthcare policy, and maintained family relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. The state proposal was submitted the next morning. Win or lose, I'd already accomplished something more valuable than any contract. I'd discovered who I was when I stopped being who everyone else needed me to be. And that person was capable of things I'd never imagined possible. 6 weeks after submitting the state proposal, I was sitting in my office reviewing expansion plans when the call came that would change everything. Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Harrison from the Department of Health. Dr. Harrison, good to hear from you. I'm calling with excellent news. Your proposal has been selected for the Rural Hospital Pilot Program. I actually had to sit down. Selected. Out of 23 consulting firms that submitted proposals, yours was chosen by our review board. Your combination of proven results, systematic approach, and understanding of rural healthcare challenges made you the clear choice. State consulting, 18-month pilot program, 12 rural hospitals across 8 regions, budget allocation of $240,000 for the full engagement. Dr. Harrison, I'm honored and excited to begin this work. There's more. Based on your proposal and our research into your track record, we're also interested in discussing your potential role in developing statewide guidelines for healthcare financial efficiency. But we'll save that conversation for after you've demonstrated success with the pilot program. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking at the photo of New Zealand that had been on my desk since the early days of my business. I'd actually taken that trip 8 months earlier, a celebration of business success and personal independence that exceeded anything I'd dreamed of during those dark days of family financial dependency. But now that photo represented something different. Not escape from a life I couldn't control, but evidence of a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. Madison walked into my office with coffee and a knowing smile. Based on that phone call, I'm guessing we got the state contract? We got it. Layla. She set down the coffee and hugged me. Do you realize what this means? It means I need to hire a lot more people very quickly. It means you've built something incredible. From that dinner where Dad dismissed you to state healthcare consulting in less than 2 years. The contrast was remarkable. Less than 2 years ago, I was working 16-hour days to fund other people's choices while my own dreams collected dust. Now I was running a consulting firm that would influence healthcare policy at the state level. That evening, my parents took me to dinner at the restaurant where we'd celebrated my business launch. But this conversation was different. Honey, Mom said, your father and I have been talking about something important. What's that? We want to apologize. Not just for that dinner where Dad was so dismissive, but for all the years we took your support for granted without acknowledging what you were sacrificing. Dad leaned forward. We realize now that we weren't just financially dependent on you. We were emotionally dependent too. Instead of celebrating your achievements and supporting your goals, we just expected you to solve our problems. We taught you to sacrifice your own needs for everyone else's comfort, Mom continued. That was wrong, and it nearly cost us our relationship with you. But look what you accomplished when you finally prioritized yourself, Dad said proudly. You've built something that serves your community while achieving the independence and success you always deserved. The scared part of me still sometimes worries I made the right choices, I admitted. Layla, Madison said, you saved us all. You saved yourself by refusing to continue being everyone's financial solution. You saved us by forcing us to become independent and self-sufficient. And now you're helping preserve healthcare services for rural communities that desperately need them. After dinner, I drove to my apartment, the same small one-bedroom place I'd been living in when I cut off my family's financial support. I could afford something much larger now, but I loved this space. It represented independence, self-determination, and the foundation of everything good that had followed. My phone buzzed with congratulatory texts. Derek. Heard about the state contract. Mom called me crying with pride. So proud of you, sis. Jennifer from my old job. Saw the announcement about your state consulting award. Meanwhile, Arnold is still unemployed. Justice served beautifully. David Park from Pacific Northwest Regional Hospital. Congratulations on the state contract. None of this surprises me. You were always destined for significant achievements. I opened my laptop and began outlining the expansion plan for my business. State consulting meant establishing regional offices, hiring specialized rural healthcare analysts, developing standardized assessment protocols that could be applied across diverse hospital systems. But as I worked, I kept thinking about that dinner nearly 2 years ago when Dad had dismissed me as merely the daughter who works, while Madison was the daughter who follows her dreams. It turned out he was wrong about both of us. Madison wasn't just the daughter who got to follow her dreams while I sacrificed mine. We were both daughters who learned to pursue our goals by supporting each other as equals rather than enabling each other's dependencies. And I wasn't just the daughter who worked. I was the daughter who understood that work could be meaningful, that financial independence was essential to self-respect, and that the best way to help people you love is to refuse to be their permanent solution to temporary problems. The woman who had been afraid to disappoint people by setting boundaries had become someone who changed people's lives by helping them discover their own capabilities. A year later, I stood in the conference room of my expanded office, looking at a map with pins marking all 12 rural hospitals in our state pilot program. Each pin represented a community that would receive better health care because their hospital learned to operate more efficiently and sustainably. Madison walked in with preliminary results from our first quarterly assessment. Layla, look at these numbers. The results exceeded every projection. Average cost savings of 18% across participating hospitals, without compromising patient care quality. Revenue enhancements averaging 15% through improved billing efficiency and service optimization. This is incredible work, I said. This is work that matters, Madison corrected. You're not just building a successful business. You're preserving essential medical services for communities that desperately need them. That afternoon, Dr. Harrison called with news I'd been hoping for but hardly dared expect. Layla, based on the pilot program results, the state legislature is interested in funding a comprehensive rural healthcare efficiency initiative. We'd like to discuss your firm's role in developing and implementing that program. A statewide program, legislative funding, policy influence at the state level, and potentially beyond. I'd be very interested in that discussion. There's something else. The success of your systematic approach has attracted attention from other states and federal healthcare organizations. Are you interested in exploring consulting opportunities outside Washington? Multi-state, federal consultation. The scope of possibility felt almost overwhelming but incredibly exciting. 2.5 years after cutting off my family's financial support, I received a call that would cement my transformation from family ATM to healthcare policy influencer. Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Rebecca Martinez from the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. Federal. The word alone made my pulse quicken. Dr. Martinez, how can I help you? We've been monitoring the success of your state rural hospital pilot program. The results have caught congressional attention. We're developing a national initiative for rural healthcare financial sustainability, and we'd like to discuss your potential role as lead consultant for the program development. I had to ask her to repeat that because my brain couldn't quite process what I was hearing. Lead consultant, national program, congressional attention. Dr. Martinez, I would be extremely interested in learning more. Excellent. Can you join us in DC next month for preliminary discussions? We're looking at a 3-year initiative with substantial federal funding. After hanging up, I sat in my office, which now occupied half a floor of a downtown Seattle building, surrounded by evidence of how completely my life had transformed. Team photos from our 12-person consulting firm, awards from hospital associations, a map showing our projects across 3 states, but most importantly, a framed photo from my family's most recent gathering. All of us celebrating Madison's engagement to her marketing agency colleague in the house my parents had bought with their own money, funded by careers they'd built through their own efforts. No financial dependency, no resentment, just genuine celebration of each other's achievements. The federal consultation in DC was unlike anything I'd experienced. Policy analysts, healthcare economists, congressional staff, representatives from rural communities across the nation, all focused on preserving essential medical services for underserved populations. Ms. Chen, Dr. Z. Martinez said during our private meeting, "Your systematic approach to healthcare financial efficiency has proven effective across diverse rural environments. We're interested in scaling this methodology nationally. What kind of scope are we discussing?" Phase 1 would involve 50 rural hospitals across 20 states. Phase 2, assuming success, would expand to include tribal health services and federally qualified health centers. Budget allocation is substantial, $2.8 million over 3 years for consulting services alone. I felt like I was in someone else's life. Less than 3 years ago, I was working as someone else's employee while funding my family's lifestyle. Now I was being invited to influence healthcare policy at the national level. Dr. Martinez, I'm honored by this opportunity. What's the timeline for decision-making? We need a comprehensive proposal within 6 weeks. Final selection will be made by a joint committee including HHS, Congressional Healthcare Subcommittee members, and Rural Hospital Association representatives. Flying back to Seattle, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It started with one simple decision, refusing to accept that my value to my family was limited to my paycheck. That decision had forced everyone to grow. Madison had discovered she was capable of professional success. My parents had rediscovered their ability to be financially self-sufficient. I had learned that I was capable of building something meaningful that served others while achieving my own goals. The federal proposal preparation consumed 6 weeks. My entire team contributed expertise, and the final document represented the most comprehensive healthcare efficiency framework we'd ever developed. But the night before submitting the proposal, I had dinner with my family to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of my business. "Layla," Dad said, raising his wine glass, 3 years ago, you made a decision that seemed harsh at the time, but turned out to be exactly what all of us needed. You taught us that the most loving thing sometimes is refusing to enable dependency," Mom added. Madison smiled. "And you proved that taking care of yourself first doesn't mean abandoning the people you love. It means becoming strong enough to actually help them grow." The scared part of me still can't believe how far we've all come, I admitted. "Look around this table," Madison said. "Dad's thriving in his career and just got another promotion. Mom's bookkeeping business is growing so much she's hiring help. I'm getting married to someone I met through work I love. And you're potentially going to influence national healthcare policy. None of us would be here if you hadn't found the courage to stop being everyone's financial solution," Dad said. "You forced us to discover we were capable of much more than we thought." The federal proposal was submitted the following morning. 2 weeks later, Dr. Martinez called with the news. "Layla, I'm pleased to inform you that your proposal has been selected. Welcome to the National Rural Healthcare Financial Sustainability Initiative." 6 months later, I stood in a congressional hearing room, presenting quarterly results from our national pilot program to a healthcare subcommittee. The numbers were remarkable. Participating hospitals had achieved an average of 22% cost reduction, while improving patient satisfaction scores and maintaining care quality. "Ms. Chen," said Committee Chair Senator Williams, "these results suggest that systematic financial efficiency consulting could preserve rural healthcare access across the nation. What's your recommendation for program expansion?" Senator Williams, "Based on our data, I believe this approach could be scaled to serve every rural hospital in America while reducing overall healthcare costs and improving patient outcomes." After the hearing, I called my family to share the news about potential program expansion. "Honey, we watched the hearing online," Mom said. "We're so proud of what you've accomplished." "It's surreal," I admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." "You know what I realized watching you today?" Madison said. You didn't just build a successful business. You built a life where your work serves something bigger than yourself while achieving everything you dreamed about. That evening, I sat in my hotel room overlooking the Capitol building, thinking about the journey from that humiliating family dinner to this moment of national recognition. The woman who had accepted being valued only for her financial contributions had become someone who created value through expertise and influenced policy that would affect millions of people. The daughter who was told her role was to work and pay bills had become someone who proved that meaningful work could serve communities while building personal success. And the scared young woman who was afraid to prioritize her own dreams had become someone who demonstrated that taking care of yourself first enables you to take better care of others. 3 years later, as I prepared to testify before Congress about making the rural healthcare program permanent, I thought about the essential truth I'd learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be someone's permanent solution to their temporary problems. Sometimes the most successful thing you can do is value yourself enough to demand that others value you appropriately. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from situations that diminish you, even when those situations involve people you love. Because on the other side of that courage lies a life built entirely on your own terms, filled with purpose and respect and the deep satisfaction of knowing that everything you've accomplished belongs genuinely to you. The National Rural Healthcare Financial Sustainability Initiative became permanent federal policy, preserving essential medical services for over 400 rural communities across America. Madison's marketing agency thrived, and she became a recognized expert in healthcare communications. My parents celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary in the house they bought with money they earned themselves. And me? I discovered that when you stop accepting less than you deserve, you don't just change your own life. You change the lives of everyone around you, often in ways more wonderful than you could have imagined. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to value yourself and demand better treatment, even from the people closest to you. Your dreams matter, your boundaries matter, and you matter. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Sometimes the best gift you can give the people you love is teaching them that you won't accept being taken for granted. Because when they learn to value you properly, everyone wins.